What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, and today we'll be bringing forth our next episode of the Dynasty Decision Series we do over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel. And I just want to quickly preface, there were a ton of submissions for this week's doubleheader that we were planning, but unfortunately, due to Easter, we can only release one episode. But I mean, we'll catch up with you guys. We'll make sure we get you guys included sometime, somehow. But either way, before we get into the episode, as always, Corey, how you doing today?
Yeah, we prioritize the people that message us first. So if you messaged us and we said we would get to your question, we'll get to it next week. We'll do a doubleheader next week for sure. So yeah, I'm doing good. As always, if you guys want to be a part of Dynasty Decisions episodes, the fastest way, the way that you skip the line is becoming a patron on patreon.com /fantasy stock exchange. You get first priority to Dynasty Decisions. Most of the questions that we're covering today are from our patrons. So if you guys want to check that out, go ahead. Link is in the description. But if you just want your questions on Dynasty Decisions, you can do so by reaching out to us on Twitter. They're on the screen right now, or on Discord. Link is in the description for that. So I'm doing good. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy. You guys know the drill. Let's hit the intro. Okay, so our first submission comes from Angantyr. I think I said that right. Just let me know in the comments down below. He is a patron of ours. Just not a hypothetical question, but a question that I think is interesting. He basically said, I would love to know how you guys would approach an auction rookie draft. Now, I have never done an auction rookie draft. I don't think you've ever done an auction rookie draft. But I think the way that you would kind of approach it and the way that you would set yourself up to prepare for an auction rookie draft, because you probably would need a decent amount of preparation to be ready for it, is to rank the rookies, whether you want to use our rankings or your own rankings, and then assign a quantitative value to each guy that you're willing to pay. And that would kind of make up the tiers that you have. So let's say you view Breece Hall in a tier of his own. It's $100 budget for the entire rookie draft. He might be worth 80% of that budget or something like that. Maybe he's worth even all of your budget. I don't know. But that's the way you would kind of set it up. And then the next tier down, let's say it's those three receivers, like we value them, and like Malik Willis and Kenneth Walker, maybe those guys are between 50 and 70% of your budget, so on and so forth. And the best way to win an auction rookie draft, I guess is how you would say it, is to know what your market is valuing. Your market value would be really, really important for that, because if nobody in your league likes Christian Watson, for example, even though he's relatively overrated from an NFL perspective, the fact that he's going to go in the first round, but if nobody's willing to spend more than $10 on the guy, then maybe that's a point in the draft that you can exploit that value.
Yeah, and again, I'm not too familiar with an auction rookie draft in general, but at the end of the day here, for me personally, if I know it's an auction style rookie draft, I'm just paying up for the top available person. Like, plain and simple. If I know, realistically, would you rather have Breece Hall or, the 102, a late second, an early third? Like, I don't know how the actual pay structure would be, but relatively speaking, I'm assuming those top assets are going to be going for a pretty penny, because why deal with a state of uncertainty when okay, I can spend this amount on Breece Hall, I can lock in, a top 5 running back in Dynasty and don't really worry. But I would want to know particularly how it's structured more. But if it's just a standard auction rookie draft, if it's just, the way the startups are organized, yeah, I'm willing to spend up on Breece Hall. I'm willing to spend up on Malik Willis. I'm willing to spend up on some of those top receivers, because I'm not too sure as to how the exact structure is organized here.
Right. And if we made auction rankings, the way I would set them up is like those guys are worth 50, 60, 70, 80% of your budget.
Easy.
The players after like the 15th, 16th overall pick in our actual rankings would be worth like $1 to $5, because there is really no consensus after those 15, 20 picks. You could grab, let's say, Breece Hall for 85 of your $100. Like, you spent up way on Breece Hall. Nobody was willing to pay more than 60, 70 bucks. But if you fill out your roster with, Justin Ross for $4 and Zonovan Knight for $2 and, guys like that, I think you're probably better off than as if you spent, let's say, 25 for Chris Olave and 40 for, Drake London and, something like that. So that's kind of how I would approach it. I would probably look to get a guaranteed stud, like Danny said, and then maybe just find value at the end of the draft, because there really is no consensus outside of, 15 to 20 or so in Superflex rookie draft. So that was an interesting question. Again, I don't know how many of you guys play in auction rookie drafts, but just an interesting gauge on, rookie market value and all that kind of stuff. So let's get on to the next patron question, which is from Jonathan. He plays in a 12-team, one quarterback, but it is a 6-point per passing touchdown, half point for first downs, half point for passing completions, and -1 point for incompletions, and -4 for INT. So this is not a super flex league, but good passing quarterbacks clearly have a lot of value in this type of format. And rushing quarterbacks maybe even take a little bit of a hit too, because it's a 6-point per passing touchdown, and you get points for pass completions and incompletions. So your Jalen Hurts types probably wouldn't have a whole lot of value in this, Malik Willis or somebody like that. But Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, like those type of quarterbacks would probably be quite valuable in this type of format.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're contextualizing it, if you're only getting a half point per completion and you're losing a point for every incompletion, you need a quarterback that can stay at least a 66.6% completion percentage in order to make sure you're not at a net negative there. So realistically here, your typical Konami code players that are, let's just say hypothetically are completing 59, 60% of their passes. Well, yeah, like you're getting the points with, their rushing ability, but you're also not getting the full maximization of their points given the discrepancy in passing touchdown in terms of 4 to 6 points, and given the discrepancy in obviously efficiency. Like Aaron Rodgers, you mentioned, is his quarterback, and Joe Burrow is his quarterback. Those are two of the more ideal quarterbacks you'd want in this format because they're going to throw for a lot of touchdowns and they're not going to make a ton of errors.
Yeah, especially Rodgers. Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers, what did he have, like 2 interceptions this year? I feel like that's
Something
what he
like
has
that.
every year. So he's a guy that would be perfect in this type of format. So looking overall thoughts on the team was his first question. It looks like you have a couple guys out of place, I would say, because you have a young team, relatively speaking, with Aaron Rodgers and Derrick Henry both on your team. But the nice thing about those two assets, and we've kind of touched on this before, specifically about Derrick Henry, is that they're like rided off into the sunset assets. Like we don't think you're going to get the adequate value in a trade. So you might as well be, better off riding those assets out, letting them produce for your fantasy team. And then eventually when they retire or fall off, then you just kind of hold the bag on those guys. But for the most part, we don't want to be doing that on those guys. But market value would dictate that you're not going to get the benefit that your team is going to get by just holding those players. So he also has a number of other questions. I know I need to draft a wide receiver in this class and possibly a tight end as well, because Gronk is his only tight end. He said there's a few teams hoarding like 4 or 5 decent tight ends on their teams. So he did make a trade where he received 2 first-round picks, one in 2022 and one in 2024. I'm not exactly sure which first this was. It could have been the 105, 110, or the 112, but he also got a 2024 first out of this in exchange for Antonio Brown, who probably at that time was performing like a top, fantasy wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers earlier in the season. And he also gave away a 2022 second. So anytime you can take an older player like Antonio Brown performing at a high level and parlay that into multiple draft picks high in the first round, slam dunk move.
Yeah, no, I think that was a phenomenal move. You took a 33 at the time year
Yeah,
old,
he's old for sure.
33-year-old volatile wide receiver with obviously a lot of issues off the field. You were able to flip that in a second into 2 firsts. Like, yeah, absolutely took that guy to the woodshed there. He also mentions here that he also got an extra first given a trade back that he made in the startup last season. So, overall, the accumulation of draft capital, you have all your picks in 2023. You have an extra 2024 first. You have 3 2022 first. Like, you are in a very, very good point here in terms of accumulating that draft capital.
Yep. And then he actually has a trade offer on the table. So speaking of Derrick Henry, I said he's going to be hard to move, but it all depends on your league dynamic, right? In the leagues that we play in, Derrick Henry is hard to move because nobody wants him because he's 28 years old and has all these, touches under his belt. But in this type of package, I'm willing to move Derrick Henry. You trade
100%.
Derrick Henry and the 112 away for the 106 and the 106 and the 112 is a pretty big difference in value, in my opinion, and a 2023 first and a second round pick. So the value for me on Derrick Henry is about the 112. Like that's about the range that I value Derrick Henry at. But again, does that make it less valuable to have Derrick Henry, or do you want to just hold on to him and get the fantasy production from him? That's, team dependent. But the fact that you can go from the 112 to the 106 and also get a first next year and a second next year, another woodshed move.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
no, I absolutely agree. He also mentions here that I've let teams know I'm willing to move either Rodgers or Burrow. Yeah, you don't feel like you're forced to, but like, yeah, if somebody's willing to pay up given the format for one of those quarterbacks, I wouldn't be opposed to it because realistically, given the amount of draft capital you have as a whole, you can completely turn this thing around, especially if you sell Derrick Henry for this package. You're going to have a full young team for the most part, apart from Gronk and Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think Rodgers would be the one that I would sell. I don't think I would sell
100%.
Burrow just because he's a young quarterback in a format that this would be very appealing to a guy like him as a guy that could be one of the best passers in the league for the next 10 years. I probably wouldn't move Joe Burrow. I would like again any
Rodgers.
player has a price, but Aaron Rodgers is probably the guy that I would move, especially if you make the Derrick Henry deal. It makes sense to get the other older asset off of your team, replenish yourself, and maybe in the Aaron Rodgers deal, maybe you trade him to somebody that has a lot of tight ends that you could get a young tight end in return.
Yep, for sure. So overall, any other underlying thoughts here? Should we move on to the next team?
No, I think you're well set up here. You got a lot of draft capital, a lot of like we haven't even really talked about his elite young pieces: Najee
Yeah.
Harris, Javonte Williams, Deontay Johnson, Jalen Waddle. Need some depth at wide receiver, but you're gonna have the 105 this year, the 106 this year. If you make this Derrick Henry trade, you can get 2 wide receivers most likely with those picks. I probably wouldn't address the quarterback position at all, even if you move Aaron Rodgers in this draft, because this scoring format is not kind to this draft class, I would say. Because it requires you to be an elite passer, and I don't think any of them are. So I probably wouldn't, target the quarterback position at 110 or any of the other picks that you have this year. So that's it for his team. Let's get on to Ernest's team, another patron of ours. You guys can see it on the screen there. Tua Davis Mills, Sam Howell, running backs, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, Michael Carter, Stevenson, etc. Jamar Chase, Rashad Bateman, Drake London, etc. at wide receiver, and David Njoku and Dan Arnold at tight end. And obviously, with rookies in the draft, he doesn't have any picks in 2022, but he does have all of his picks, all 4 of his picks in 2023. So a few weeks back, he participated in his first startup that he said that included rookies this offseason that haven't been drafted to the NFL yet. This is a super flex league, no tight end premium. He said, I think I made a huge noob mistake by drafting too young and falling in love with undrafted rookies. It also didn't seem to help that I hadn't seen your rookies or your running backs to move on from video. So he does have Miles Sanders. He does have Michael Carter on his team as well. Overall, looking at his team, I don't think you made a huge mistake. I think your team is in okay shape. The only thing that kind of makes me nervous is your quarterback
QB.
position.
Yep. Yeah, no, I fully agree. The quarterbacks here are very, very sketchy. I mean, Tua is probably going to be, a long-term 2-3 type. He's not somebody I'm overly excited about, but especially I'm not overly excited about if he's the main piece of my quarterback core. Davis Mills, I mean, I think he could have a pretty solid 2022 season, but let's be honest here. If that team's picking in the top 5, you can almost peg them into Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. So I don't know. There's a lot of volatility here. Obviously, with Howell, you're hoping and praying he gets that first round draft capital, because if he does get it, you're going to get a very, very good value. Apparently, where you would have gotten him in this startup. So, I feel like you just got a lot of the QB 2, 3, 4 types. I would want that number one. I would want that, obviously, for your perspective here. I mean, you have all 4 picks in 2023. Your team's in a good position to put up points. I would try to transition that to try to get myself in position for CJ Stroud, get myself in position for Bryce Young, because if you get one of those cores, like if you had a Bryce Young or CJ Stroud as your number 1, 2 was your number 2, Mills, Howell, Bridgewater were like your 3, 4, 5, that would have been a better situation to be in. But yeah, that's really like the only thing missing here, because I mean, you got your locked and loaded elite asset type of wide receiver. Same thing with the running back position. And although you're missing a prototypical tight end, like I can see a case where Njoku returns on value this year too.
Yeah, I would gauge your league market on the running backs that you have on your team,
100%.
because if you could strip your running back core dry and collect 4 or 5 first round picks in 2023 and also maybe some 2024 capital and maybe another elite wide
Yeah.
receiver, young wide receiver, then this was probably more set up to be a great team at that point, because like you really need Sam Howell to hit. And I like Sam Howell. He's my quarterback 1 currently,
Risky.
but if he hits, he's still probably only like the 10th best quarterback in Dynasty. That's if he hits big too. Like he's probably never going to get past even like your Trey Lances and Dak Prescotts of the world. I don't even think like there's no chance in hell he gets near Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson or any of those guys. But even if he hits big, he's probably still like your quarterback 10 overall in Dynasty. So this is just a little bit of a sketchy situation to be in. I would gauge your market on Jonathan Taylor, because you can get a lot for him. I would gauge your market on J.K. Dobbins. I would gauge the market on your other, running backs. See if you can acquire more wide receivers, maybe a tight end, maybe another quarterback, or just draft capital, just because this team is set up on a shaky foundation right now. Let's put it that way. He does say, though, my team is young and I'm in it for the long haul. I'm willing to wait a season or 2 to start winning. Where do I go from here? I want to learn from my mistakes. What do you think my options are, and what moves, if any, should I make? That's basically what I just kind of outlined. Running back position is where I would be looking to see what I can do.
basically you just pointed yourself to the exact fix for this roster. You just said, I don't mind waiting a season or two to start competing. If you know you're not going to be competing for a season or two, you get rid of all those running backs. You get rid of all those running backs. Like Jonathan Taylor, you could probably get realistically an early first this year and 2 extra first round picks
Well,
on
the
top of
draft
it.
already happened, so you're not going to get any 2022 picks. So
Oh,
you're going to be
sorry.
looking. You're going to be
3
looking for
2023 picks.
2023 and 2024 capital.
Yeah.
And here's the thing with Jonathan Taylor: as much as we love Jonathan Taylor and he's a great dynasty asset, he does kind of pigeonhole you into winning now if you take him in the first round. If you probably, I'm assuming you passed on some quarterbacks. You probably passed on Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson. And if you had those guys instead of Jonathan Taylor, you'd probably be in a lot better of a situation, because even if you were trying to win this year and you had Lamar Jackson instead of Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, Michael Carter, Ramondre Stevenson is a fine enough running back core for you to win this year. So again, it's not that we don't like picking Jonathan Taylor in the first round, but when you made that selection, you probably should have committed yourself after taking Jamar Chase that you probably should have went towards more win now build. And instead of taking Tua, instead of taking Davis Mills and Sam Howell, you probably should have went for more like Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady types at that point, because you're pigeonholing yourself by taking a running back. And I know he's like 23 years old. He does put you in a win now window, regardless of how young he is.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about it, let's just say hypothetically, like you give again, I don't know the context of your league's micro market, but I would gauge to see maybe somebody's willing to give Trey Lance and a 2023 first for Jonathan Taylor. I know in some casual leagues, Jonathan Taylor is consistently a mid first round startup pick, and Trey Lance is a mid to back end too in most casual leagues. So if you're able to net that type of haul, get a Konami code elite ceiling type of quarterback to anchor this core, and get a 2023 first to complement this youth, that would be a deal I'd be looking to move. Obviously, Dobbins, you kind of mentioned, if you can flip into draft capital or a young wide receiver in a pick, like I would look to that. Overall, I'm just trying to rid myself of my RB points already. And once you do that, you're already inherently increasing the value of your own 2023 first. If you trade off Dobbins, Taylor, Sanders, Carter, Ramondre, whatever running backs you want to put into that category, if you trade them off, like, you're ridding yourself of fantasy points, which in your situation, given the youth of your team, is what you are trying to do. You want to get in position of Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Boutte, Addison, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, you want to be able to have capital in that early to mid portion of that 2023 draft. Because I'm telling you, I've looked into it. Corey's looked into it. I think everybody on Dynasty Twitter's looked into it. That class is going to be special.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very good.
Yep.
And like a move that I'd be trying to make too, if you could flip like J.K. Dobbins plus Davis Mills to a quarterback needy team for a 2023 first and like a young wide receiver or maybe another quarterback or something like that, that's probably a move I'd be looking to make, because again, what you want to do is align your quarterback core and your running back cores primes together and have your wide receiver core be the thing that you build up first, and your tight end core probably the same thing. When you're rebuilding a team, typically you want to start with a lot of young wide receivers that are going to hold value for a long time, young quarterbacks that are going to hold value for a long time. And as it stands right now, your quarterbacks are a major question mark. You have some really, really, really good wide receivers, and your running backs are really, really good as well. But you are pigeonholing yourself into competing now when you build the team around a running back, around running backs, basically.
Yep. No, I fully agree with that. Gage, Ramondre Stevenson, maybe you can get an early 2 this year. Same thing with Michael Carter. Maybe you could even get a back end first. Like, genuinely, I mean, obviously your draft already happened, but you target a contender and you say, hey, listen, you're going to be picking in the 110 to 112 range next year, given the status of your team. Get a guy like Michael Carter who could be
Give
a
him
lock and
Sanders
loaded.
too. Give him Sanders and Carter.
Carter and Sanders, yeah. Genuinely, like, I would do that. I mean, Carter and Sanders or Carter and Stevenson. I mean, maybe somebody's super hyped on Rojo because he signed with the Chiefs. Like, I am literally gauging interest in every single running back on your team.
Yeah, because you do have a lot of trade value in these running backs. So we spent a lot of time on Ernest's team. Again, I don't think you did, a terrible job. You said I'm worried that I made a huge noob mistake. I don't think you did a terrible job, but I do think the mistake that I would have changed was that once you took Jonathan Taylor and Jamar Chase, which I don't know how you got both of those players, but once you took those guys in your dynasty startup, you should have shifted towards maybe more of a contending type of build. Not necessarily take a bunch of 35-year-old players, but in your tiebreaker decisions, maybe lean towards more of the win now asset.
Yep. No, I fully agree there. So we can move on to the next team. That's going to be from Corey Vann, another patron. And you guys can see the team on the screen, but quarterback, Zach Wilson, Davis Mills leading the charge there. Running back, Matt Breida, Benjamin, and Zach Moss. Wide receivers headlined by Robert Woods, Mike Williams, Van Jefferson. Tight end Cole Kmet, along with a boatload of capital in 2022. He does not have this 2023 first, but he does have 3 seconds and 2/3. So overall, he kind of says here, I did a gaggle of trades over the last couple months to blow up this roster and rebuild. He asked, what are my possibilities with these 2022 picks? And he also asked me in the DMs, like what would be a typical offer he could make for the 101. So I'll let you tackle it first. What are your thoughts on the team, the capital, and overall the question that he has here?
Yeah, so I'll start with the question. I would say there's absolutely zero chance I trade for the 101 with this roster because, like I just kind of said for Jonathan Taylor, I know Breece Hall's a young running back, but when you have a running back on a rookie contract, you want to align that with your winning window.
Yep.
And your winning window is probably not for a couple of years because this roster is in really rough shape. You kind of already talked about it. You're trying to blow up your roster and rebuild. Unfortunately, this year in a one quarterback league, your picks don't have a whole lot of value. 110, 111, 112. They're first round picks, but they're not exciting first round picks in this year's class because we don't have an overly deep draft class outside of the top, 10 players in a one quarterback format. So what I would be doing if I were you is trying to sell my picks in this year's class for 2023 and 2024 picks because it's not like you have the 102 and the 103 and the 104 and you can get some foundational players. At 110, 111, 112, you're looking best case scenario at Chris Olave, Jahan Dotson, George Pickens types. And that's fine if that's and nobody's willing to give you value and you just pick those players. But if you're willing to really punt this thing, get your own first round pick back, which would be ideal if you could, your 2023 first. If you can trade the 110 and the 111 for your 2023 first next year, I'm easily willing to do that.
Yes, no, I fully agree. Given the context of your team, I do expect that first to be relatively early. And in general, I mean, we're looking at the top of the class, even in a one quarterback league. I mean, the fact that we can already list off as many names as we can, Bijan Robinson, Kayshon Boutte, Jordan Addison. I mean, we're talking about a loaded class, even if we're not talking about the quarterbacks. Like we can go realistically right now, do a 2023 first round mock draft one quarterback and still have names that we felt like we left off, like genuinely, like, oh, I can't believe this guy didn't make the cut. There are legitimately like 12, 15 non-quarterbacks next year that would be fringe first round picks at minimum this year.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is that maybe your league is already hip to the 2023 class. Maybe they know it's going to be good and they don't want to give you those picks back. Go for 2024. You're not going to be winning for a long time with this roster. So if they have no idea who Travion Henderson is, if they have no idea who Xavier Worthy is and all the guys that are going to be in the 2024 class, target that class and make that the point for your rebuild. If you can go into 2024 and take away, like if you can sell the 110 for a 2024 first, do it. If you can sell the 111 for 2024 first, do it. You can sell any of these picks for 2024 capital, 2023 capital if you can. That is what I'm looking to do because I am expecting this to be 2 to 3 years at minimum of a rebuild because unfortunately for you, you don't have really any cornerstone pieces on your roster. You don't have a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson or anybody like that. So everybody is up for sale. Anybody and everybody is up for sale. If you can sell Mike Williams in the 110 for somebody's 2023 first and 2024 first because they're a contender, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, even if you want to package a few of those seconds to make sure you can get a future first. Like I don't know again the context of your league's micro market, but let's just say somebody's super hyped about Russ going to Denver, and you can package like I don't know Tim Patrick and those 3 twos to get a contenders one. Like I'm willing to do it in that scenario because at the end of the day here, I mean we've studied this class, we kind of know that those second round picks are realistically going to be late 2, early 3 players in a super flex, which this year late 2, early 3 is more so mid to late 3 in 2023. So I mean,
the 210 and the 211 in a one quarterback league are going to be like Zamir White, Zonovan Knight type of players, which are coin flips at best. They're probably 10% hit rate type of players. Like we're not talking about stud second round picks like we had in 2020 or we had in 2018 or a couple classes ago. So what we're looking for with this team is align your winning window in 2024 is when you should first start to look to maybe make this team somewhat competitive. So as much draft capital as you can acquire for 2023 and 2024 is what I'd be looking to do. If you spend barely any of these picks that you have this year, I think it's a win. If you're able to parlay this into, even if you're not getting first, like go for 2024 seconds, go for 2023 seconds with some of the second rounders you have.
Yeah, with the seconds, obviously, don't do that with the first.
But if somebody's willing to give you their 2023 second for the 204 this year, go ahead.
Yeah, no, then definitely. I mean, 204 this year, somebody's willing to give you that. 2023 second for 205. You have a bunch of the picks in that early portion of the second round that, especially a contender, they might say, oh, fuck, like, you know what? I can just relay my pick from next year and use it as a piece that I can use on my roster this year. Those are the type of moves I'm looking to make. Even if a contender says, hey, I really like that 203, I'm willing to give you my 2023 second and third. That's a move I look
And
to.
throw in players too. If they want more,
Yeah.
like give them Van Jefferson, Robert
Van
Woods, like who
Jefferson.
cares? You don't need those guys. So
Yeah.
by all means, make some moves like that. Nobody on your team is expendable. No picks on your team are expendable. You are looking to absolutely dominate the 2023 and 2024 class. That is the goal of this team. So let's move on to the next question, which is from Scott, also a patron of ours. Just a simple trade question, and it kind of relates back to the video that I did do last week talking about selling the running backs before the NFL draft, because this is one of those running backs in Miles Sanders. He has an offer on the table for his Miles Sanders to trade away for the 209 this year and a 2023 third. Now, we kind of just talked about it. In a super flex format, the 209 is probably not that great of a player. It's probably at best like David Bell, Justin Ross type. Like you're not looking at a guy that is going to be a superstar piece for your team. But as I kind of talked about in that video, Miles Sanders this year in the draft has a risk of going from late second round value, mid to late second round value overall on the market to being virtually useless for your dynasty roster if they draft a high caliber running back. And Breece Hall has a chance to go to Philadelphia. There's a legitimate chance that they draft Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker, even Isaiah Spiller, or even, Brian Robinson or James Cook or anybody that could contribute to that running back core. And that is going to big time impact Miles Sanders' value, which already isn't that high to begin with. So getting the 209 and a 2023 third is a package that I'm willing to move off of Miles Sanders for. Do I wish I could get more for him? Do I wish I could get a late first or an early second or something like that? For sure, but I don't think you're going to get that on the open market given Miles Sanders' recent disappointment in the past couple of years. And I think this is enough for me to move off of Miles Sanders and mitigate that risk of him getting replaced off of my roster.
Yeah, I mean, would I have preferred this to be more in the 205, 206 area? Of course. But I mean, at the end of the day, here at that 209, I mean, we see it all the time that people don't know how to draft. And I mean, we like assuming that we ourselves know how to draft, but at the end of the day here, we're just projecting forward. So, I mean, that 209, I mean, realistically, we might have someone be ranked at the 203, but your league micro market will have that guy more so as a mid to late second round pick. And if that's the case, if you're getting, the FSC 203, 204 at that 209, or whoever your 203, 204 is at that 209, I mean, you're getting a ton of value there. And obviously you combine that with that 2023 third. I mean, it's another dart throw. Miles Sanders is kind of whatever at this point. At least you're transitioning a quote unquote dead asset into two expendable liquid pieces in that 209 and 2023 third. So I would agree with you there. I would probably prefer the picks. Just give me another chance to try to hit.
Yeah, and maybe who knows? Maybe there's a guy on the board at the 209 that somebody really wants, and you can get their 2023 second out of them on the clock, and then you transitioned instead of the 209, you got a random 2023 second and a 2023 third for Miles Sanders instead, or you can trade it for a veteran player at that point. So a lot of options with that. Let's move on to the next team, which is Jeff, and I'll let you take it away with that.
Yeah, for sure. So he mentions here this is actually a one quarterback league. So one quarterback, two running back, two wide receivers, two flex. And in the flex, he can fit either a running back, wide receiver, or tight end. So he mentions here that this is where my team's currently at. I'm trying to be aggressive leading up to the draft in moving Carter, Gabe Davis, Rondale Moore. Team is young and with 2 firsts this year. And next, I think I have a chance in the next few years to compete. The main questions that he has are what moves would you try to make or players picks to target leading into this draft? And would you take a wait and see approach with this team? So I'll let you kind of look at the team and try to help you, answer those questions. And I'll
So obviously the first thing we want to look at is cornerstone pieces, which you have a lot of. You have Kyle Pitts, you have T. Higgins, you have Michael Pittman Jr., you have not really any cornerstone pieces at running back or at quarterback, but it is a one quarterback league. So I suppose the quarterback core you have for now is probably fine. At the 101, like it's Breece Hall. Like I'm going to take Breece Hall there in a one quarterback format. The 102 is whatever receiver you deem to be the best, based on their draft capital, based on where they go, and based on what you like about them. For me, as it stands right now, it's Drake London. But if he goes to the Eagles at 18 and, Treylon Burks goes to the Buffalo Bills at 25, it'll be Treylon Burks. If Garrett Wilson goes 4th overall to the Jets and Drake London goes to the Eagles and Treylon Burks goes to, I don't know, some random team, then I'll take Garrett Wilson at that point. It's all dependent on where they go in the draft, how high they get drafted, and what you think of them as well. With this team, I'm probably just looking to address those two positions with 101 and 102. And then next year, probably looking to fill out my running back core outside of Breece Hall. If you can sell some of your fringe pieces for more capital, either in the second round this year or the second round next year or the first round somehow next year. If you can flip both Melvin Gordon and Michael Carter, or Michael Carter and Rondale Moore, like you said in the question, for a 2023 first, by all means do something like that as well.
I was going to say too, if you wanted to include, Carter, Rondale, 202 and 102, and you can get like 3 firsts out of that, like by all means. Like I would look into something like that as well. Cause I mean, if we're looking at it realistically, Michael Carter, Rondale Moore, and the 202 for the most part could probably at least get you a 2023 first, in my opinion.
Right. I would say that might be a little bit too much to pay for a first if it's going to be late. If we know it's going to, I got a chance to be early to mid or something like that, then I think that's a fine deal to make. But Michael Carter and Rondale Moore together should net you a 2023 first. I think there should be a team in your league that values the youth of those players and also the fact that we kind of know what they are at this point. There's hype around both guys to the point that you should be able to get a random 2023 first for those two players. And if you have to add in Odell Beckham Jr. or anybody like that, by all means, add those guys in as well.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it depends on your league's micro market, but if I had to throw in the 202, and I know that there's still a chance that that first is going to be early to mid, like say it's a fringe contender that finished 7th last year, and he's like, oh, I want this last piece to try to make the playoffs. That's the type of team that you want to exploit here.
Yeah, exactly. So as far as, your basic question, who do I want to draft? I'm going Breece Hall and Drake London, depending on landing spot for those wide receivers. 202, you should be able to get another good-ish wide receiver prospect there. Maybe you want to address another quarterback too, because it is a one quarterback league. I don't know if you're going to get Malik Willis at 202 in a one quarterback league, but if you can get Sam Howell there with top 40 draft capital, I don't mind throwing him into the mix at your quarterback position because you don't really have a whole lot of ceiling there. You have Mac Jones, who's going to probably be a starting quarterback for a long time, but not a high fantasy ceiling. If you can hit on a Sam Howell at 202 in this year's class, who goes to like the Lions or something at 32 in the draft, then I think that would probably be a much better situation to have, or Desmond Ridder, maybe, if that's what you're about to say.
No, I was going to say maybe you can take Mac Jones in the 202 and try to get an upgrade.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Like I think he mentioned, obviously, he might have mentioned it to us when we had our consultation that there's a few teams in this league that are hoarding elite quarterbacks. I believe he said like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. So it might be tough to make that type of move. But I mean, if you can, I would always look into that because Mac Jones is just like the perfect packageable piece right now because I feel like his real life NFL standing is affecting his actual fantasy value for a lot of people. Like I think I saw on a tweet yesterday, somebody said they would rather have Mac Jones and Trey Lance in Dynasty, which makes no freaking sense at all. But I mean, that just kind of goes to show you that, like, for the most part in more casual leagues, people think, oh yeah, this consistent 10 to 15 year starter paired with Belichick, he's gonna
10 to 15 fantasy points is what you're getting out of him.
Literally though. So if you can do that, obviously look into it. It fully depends on what's available on your league market. But overall, I mean, you mentioned those fringe pieces: Carter, Davis, Rondale Moore, Ramondre Stevenson. Basically, all the guys that you have kind of italicized here are guys I'm looking engaging in value apart from Pitts, because I don't know why he's italicized, but do not trade Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, for sure. So anything else on Jeff's team, or should we move on to Bryan Harris, which is the last patron question, I believe?
I don't have anything else here. Just keep plugging it in, and look to see if you can maybe maneuver that board and try to get 2023 draft capital, because this team is close. Honestly, I think after that 2023 draft, you get a couple pieces here, and this team is in a really good position.
Right. And you talked about moving Rondale Moore and Gabriel Davis and stuff. Like, you don't need to move those guys if nobody's willing to give you the value, because they are young. They could, ascend and eventually become better players. We're just, not as high on those guys as some people in your league might be. So let's move on to Bryan Harris's team. Last patron question here. And I think Corey and Ernest could learn a lot from how Bryan structured his team in a startup. So he basically said he just drafted this team. It's a startup team, 12 team super flex, half PPR. He drafted 3 quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds, which, if you're going to go for a more longevity based thing, is something that is smart to do. Now, do you need to necessarily get a great quarterback 3? Probably not. You probably could have waited and gotten like a Mac Jones as your quarterback 3 in the 7th, 8th round of the draft. But what are you saying?
I'm just going to say, usually you don't plan on drafting
Trey
3
Lance
quarterbacks
should not be there in the 3rd round, is what
Trey Lance should not be there in the 3rd round. Deshaun Watson should not be there in the 2nd round. So if we're taking a value-based asset accumulation approach, you smash those 3 picks out of the park. You don't plan on taking 3 quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds, but if your league's just going to give you that type of value, I absolutely love what he did here. You have 3 of the top 8 or 9 dynasty quarterbacks, and all guys I feel like should be taken within the first 15 picks of a startup. So yeah, that is a ton of value accrued here.
Right, and you could potentially trade those guys for a down tier and pick up
Yeah.
another wide receiver or pick up another running back. So post draft, I'd imagine these guys should be worth more than they were worth in the startup, given where you got them. So if somebody's really hurting at quarterback and they want a young piece like Trey Lance, you could probably trade Trey Lance for like a couple first rounders and a young wide receiver to add to your core, and then you could use maybe one of your picks in future drafts to fill out your quarterback 3. Or if you want to just downgrade to like a Zach Wilson from Trey Lance, you might be able to get a 2023 first on top of that in exchange for Trey Lance, or maybe a
I need
2023
more than
first,
that.
Marquise Brown and Zach Wilson or something for Trey Lance.
Yeah, okay. If you got 2023 first, Marquise Brown and Zach Wilson, if it was just the first, like yeah, I wouldn't do that. But if you can get a young receiver or a first round pick and a young promising quarterback, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But at the end of the day, here, no matter what, if you decide to flip any of those quarterbacks, you're gonna get way more value post draft than you would have during your startup if you had passed on them. So good job in recognizing the value discrepancy, recognizing that market inefficiency, and taking advantage of it.
Yeah. So he asked, where do we see this team heading this year? I mean, you're probably not going to win, I would say, because you have more so of like a longevity build. You're going to be set up well into the future. You have kind of like a
Yep.
hero RB situation going on for this year with J.K. Dobbins and a bunch of fodder behind him from a redraft perspective. But you do have a pretty solid wide receiver core. You have a good tight end, T.J. Hawkinson. You're going to have your elite production is going to come from your quarterback position,
Yeah.
obviously. And at the 105, would you add Kenneth Walker to this team to try and make it competitive?
I don't think the wide receivers are strong enough to win this year. I'll be honest. You have a lot of value. Like I think Bateman's got good value. Ayuk's got good value. Obviously, Deontay's got more value, and he's a win now type of player. But I mean, other than Deontay, I don't really see a case for.
Unless Lockett gets traded or something, probably not. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, like, you have a lot of wide receiver 2, 3, 4 types, which is fine. But if you're trying to contend, you need guys that can challenge that top 10, top 12 type of area. And aside from Deontay Johnson, I just don't see that level of ceiling. So overall, I mean, I think a few of these guys can end up developing into that by 2023. But that just kind of shows me that this is more so of a 2023 team as opposed to trying to compete just exactly this year.
Right. So the ideal situation for you is you grab your best receiver available at 105. At 208 and 305, this draft class might not be deep, but what there is a lot of in this class is like upside late second, early third round running back. So if you
Yes.
grab a running back like, Tyler Algier at 208, and at 305, you can get,
Pierre Strong.
Donovan Knight or something like that, then maybe those guys can turn into something. And then come 2023, when you have, a mid first round pick to address your position with Sean Tucker or Jahmyr Gibbs to add to this running back core, then your team will be fully ready to compete by that point. And you might have some young upside running backs that you hit on in 2022 as well.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, you mentioned two running backs next year. I mean, realistically, too, if you also wanted to add like a Boutte, a Jackson Smith-Jigba, Jordan Addison, like that would also supplement some ceiling at the wide receiver position and would also leave you available liquid to be able to, if you wanted to flip Gallup in a 2 to get a contending running back, if you feel like your team's in that type of shape, you have a lot of flexibility in that regard to make the move. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we know you're not competing in April, so don't worry about setting a lineup in April. If September comes and you recognize a value of veteran running back and you think you can make a push for your championship, go nuts. Go get them on the cheap. Go get your, 2023 James Conner, your Leonard Fournette, maybe, I mean, let's just think about old productive running backs by 2023. Can't really put a name on one, but I mean, maybe Nick Chubb's valued around there by then. Who
Yeah,
knows?
for sure. I do think the first move that I'd be looking to make is seeing what the quarterback market is in my league. Because if
Yeah.
somebody's willing to give you a huge package for one of those quarterbacks, and then you can also get a down tier or something like that, because realistically, you don't need these 3 guys. And again, we don't want to be focused on our starting lineup in April, which is never a smart thing to do. But if somebody's willing to give you a down tier quarterback and a boatload of picks and a young piece at wide receiver or running back, then I am willing to entertain an offer like that for either Kyler, Watson, or Lance. So that's basically our thoughts on that team. Let's move on to DTB Brownie's team, which is from the Discord. I'll let you take it away with his.
Yeah, for sure. So he's got a couple trades listed here, as well as his current capital and his current team. So he mentions here, this is the second year of my first ever Dynasty League. I have plenty more bench players, but they aren't, I mean, they're fodder pieces, as we like to say on the channel. I was wondering what your thoughts are of my team. Do I compete now, rebuild, what are my needs in the next 2 years? So overall, I mean, looking at the team quarterback, you got Kirk Cousins, Tua Tagovailoa, and Daniel Jones heading that core. Running backs obviously headlined here mostly by the top three being Javonte, Saquon, and Antonio Gibson. Wide receivers, a very old core with Evans, Thielen, Ridley, Rondale. Rondale's not old, but he's also not good. Tight end Darren Waller, Pat Fryermuth leading that core, along with the 2022 106 or 103, 106, 110, and 206 for the main pieces of picks, as well as two 2023 firsts and three 2023 thirds. So overall, looking at this team, what are your thoughts? And we'll also address the trades that he made.
Yeah, so I think you could go a number of different directions with this team, because you do have a mix. I'd say a pretty healthy mix of like players in their primes and players that are going to continue to accumulate in value. I'd say for the most part, your team is more so aligned with a competitive team just based on the players that you have, but you do have a lot of draft capital as well. And when you're in a position like that, you don't necessarily need to tear it down and rebuild, because I know the worst thing you can do in Dynasty is just be constantly rebuilding and never compete. But at the same time, you do have an interesting position. For me, the name that stands out is Darren Waller, because you have Pat Fryermuth, that he might be a guy that you might be looking to shop. If you can turn Darren Waller into a wide receiver instead of a draft pick, because your team could compete this year, but your wide receiver core is a little suspect. So if you could turn Darren Waller into Amon-Ra St. Brown or Marquise Brown, or maybe an older wide receiver like Keenan Allen, or maybe somebody in that kind of range, that's probably what I'm thinking.
He actually just updated me. I missed the comment. He actually did trade Waller. So it's funny you mentioned, trade Waller, because he did trade Waller. He traded Waller the 110 along with the 2023 second and third in exchange for this year's 101, and his plan is to go after Brees. Yeah, I mean, if you're getting Brees, I mean, you have a four stack of top 10 to 12 running backs this year. Like
Yeah,
that's
and I'd if you do get Brees, which I think is a smart move, you probably want to shop Saquon Barkley.
yeah.
I think you should probably shop
Yeah.
him and try and turn him into one or two wide receivers that can help you out if you can, or more draft capital. That's always an option too, because you have the if you have the 101, you also have the 103. So you can address and the 106. So you could probably get Garrett Wilson and Drake London, or at very least like Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, or Drake London and Jameson Williams, or something like that to add to your core. And then if you trade Saquon Barkley, let's say for Jalen Waddle or something like that, then your team is really rounding itself out nicely.
Another thing I'll say too, I mean, the 103
could be Malik Willis also.
That, or yeah, I would maybe even look at maybe attaching the 103 and Tua, and seeing if I can go after a big fish at quarterback if my plan is to compete this year. Because I mean, Kirk Cousins is a really, really good quarterback too to have. If you can turn 103 and Tua into
Russell Wilson
into like somebody in that range, maybe that gets you Dak. Who knows?
Maybe, yeah, could get Dak Prescott, might get you there.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, overall, you're in a good situation. He says, "What are my needs in the next 2 years, and what I should do now?" So, basically, you acquired the 101. You went and you made that move, and you made that decision because you're making that move to package capital and go acquire a player like Brees Hall. You're going to have to try to make your competing window now with Brees Hall, Javonte Williams. Obviously, if you trade Saquon Barkley for two win now type of wide receivers,
but you can always keep them too. If you have 3 flex spots on your team, you can start all these running backs. By all means, keep them.
For sure. The only reason why I would be more willing to package, Barkley for multiple competitive type of wide receivers is because of the status of the wide receiver core. Because
he's the riskiest running back on your team also.
Yeah. Because outside of Evans and Thielen, like Ridley's not playing this year. Who's going to step up and be your wide receiver?
You basically got to hope that, let's say, Drake London at 103 and Garrett Wilson at 106, or Jameson Williams at 106 fills out your need for that position because you traded away your 110. But yeah, I still think even if that's the case, even if you don't trade Barkley and you just have to rely on 2 rookies, Adam Thielen and Mike Evans, you could probably get by given the strength of your running back core once you add Brees Hall to the mix. Real quick, do we want to cover these trades that he made?
Yeah.
So we can CMC, Jameis Winston in exchange for Tua, 103, a 2023 first, and a 2023 third. So the 103 and a 2023 first, is that enough for you to move off of CMC?
Yes.
Yeah, and
easily
then
in
two.
a
I'd rather have
heartbeat.
Tua than Jameis Winston straight up.
Eh,
So that's a
yep.
pretty easy move.
I
And then you
mean,
throw the third in maybe with the
yeah.
CMC side as well.
Well, I mean, in a heartbeat, if we're looking at it realistically, 103 in the 2023 first, let's just say hypothetically, whatever your top ranked wide receiver is this year, Drake London, Traylon Burks for me, Garrett Wilson, you name it. Let's just peg that name in at 103. So you're talking about one of those guys, one of those stud wide receiver prospects we got this year, along with the 2023 first. We're just assuming is going to be mid to
Mid to
late,
late.
given that this guy's going after CMC and Jameis, so he's probably trying to position for himself for a championship. Give me the young assets there. I love CMC. He's going to be a very, very good contributor. But realistically, if I can flip that 25, 26-year-old volatile running back that's been dealing with injuries for 2 first-round picks, including one that's in the top 3, I absolutely love that deal for you and trying to get younger. The other trade that he ended up making here, he traded
I love
away.
how he lists Kyle Trask as trash too. I love to
Oh,
see that.
he actually messaged me and he said, I meant to type Trask instead of trash, but you probably get that point anyways.
Yeah, literally. So he traded away Tom Brady, Kyle Trash, who's not going to be worth anything anytime
Yeah,
soon, trust me. And he received Adam Thielen, the 110, and a
smash.
2023 third. So the
Yeah,
110 in Tom Brady is probably pretty fair value, I would say.
I
For
would
a
rather the
competitive
pick.
team,
Yeah.
I'm okay giving up a late first round pick if I have a chance to win this year. That's the only way I would do it, obviously. But this guy must think he has a chance to win this year with Tom Brady. He's securing the future to Tom Brady behind him, but that's not worth anything because he's not going to be the future to Tom Brady. Adam Thielen, also a good piece to get on top of that because he's probably pretty undervalued right now in Dynasty. If
Yeah.
you're a contending team and you're looking to fill out your wide receiver core, your flex spot, I think Adam Thielen's a perfect guy for anybody who's a contender out there listening to this to go out and trade for.
Yep. No, I would agree with you there. I like both these deals for you. I think you did a phenomenal job on both of them. And overall, I mean, you got a very, very good accumulation of assets here. Yeah, just try to see once you get Brees Hall, if you can take one of those other running backs, specifically Saquon Barkley for the most part, given the context of your team, and see if you can get a couple picks to add to that wide receiver core. So overall, I mean, you're in a good position. Good work.
Yep, for sure. So let's move on to Eli's team. He
Yep.
reached out to me on Twitter. You guys can see his
Yep.
team on the screen there. Quarterbacks, Kyler Murray, Justin Fields in a 10-teamer. Then he's got Mixon, Jacob, CEH, ETN at running back. He also has Debo Samuel, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, etc. Gabriel Davis, Rondell Moore at wide receiver. Also has Pat Freiermuth and Mike Gesicki at tight end. So a pretty well-rounded roster for the most part. Just quarterback 3 is a bit of a question mark, I would say. And then he also has the 110 this year, 3 2023 first, 2 seconds in 2023, and then all of his picks in 2024 as well. He's basically saying, thinking of drafting a quarterback at 110, but it kind of depends on how everything plays out. That is pretty much the motto of this entire quarterback class, I would say, is it depends on how everything plays out. Because at the 110, if Matt Corral or Desmond Ridder or Sam Howell goes in the first round, or borderline first round even, then I think the 110 is a fine pick for them. In a 10-teamer, the 110 is a pretty valuable pick, obviously. And in a super flex league for a 10-teamer, the quarterback position has a little bit less value. But if Matt Corral goes 32 to the Detroit Lions, I'm okay spending the 110 on him.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's funny because there's a scenario that only one quarterback's picked in the first round, and there's a scenario where 4 or 5 are picked in the first round. Like, we generally don't know how the NFL fully views this quarterback class. I mean, we've seen even in recent expert mocks recently that Matt Corral has been mentioned to the Seahawks, like Desmond Ritter has been mentioned to the Saints or the Steelers. Obviously, we've already heard a ton of the Malik Willis hype. People are already basically pegging in Kenny Pickett at 6th overall to Carolina, given that picture of him with Matt Rule at Temple. Like, there's
And
so
then the best
many.
quarterback in the entire class, Sam Howell, we have no idea where he's going to go.
Yeah, no, literally. Although a couple, there's a little niche on Twitter that likes him with the Lions, so we'll see if that happens.
I'm part of that niche. I would
Yeah,
love if Sam Howell went 32 to the Lions.
yeah. Imagine 2. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, oh, geez.
No,
Yeah, no, that'd be
but
pretty crazy. But he also asked basically, what does he need besides quarterback? Honestly, you don't have a whole lot of needs. You probably know what we're about to say because if you've been listening to this channel for any period of time, you know that we're not the biggest Joe Mixon and Dynasty guys. I would gauge the market on Joe Mixon. It's. I mean, we sound like a broken record at this point, but if somebody's
oh,
willing to give you a young running back in exchange for Joe Mixon, if you can, I mean, you already have Travis Etienne on your team, but if you can get, you know, J.K. Dobbins plus for Joe Mixon, which I think you should be able to do right now, given Dobbins' injury status and the fact that they're poking around Melvin Gordon. I think you should be able to get something like that. I also, you guys know I'm not a big fan of CEH as well, so I'd probably be trying to sell him. He was in the sell these running backs before the NFL draft video. And also those receivers that have some value right now with Gabriel Davis and Rondale Moore. If you can package Gabriel Davis and CEH and get up to a secure asset like a wide receiver, like a stud wide receiver, like, you know, Amon-Ra St. Brown, a second or something like that in exchange for that kind of package, I would absolutely be looking to do something like that.
Yep. No, I would agree with you with that. Yeah, I mean, Gabriel Davis, Rondale Moore. If we're looking at running back, obviously CEH. I mean, realistically, I wouldn't be opposed to given value if somebody made an offer on any of those top 3 running backs on the team. Like ETN, for the most part, I'm at least aligned, if not ahead of
I'm
the
more
current
inclined to
market.
hold Jacobs as well, just because I think
That's
he's
fair.
probably going to have his best season of his career this year.
That's fair. I mean, it could be a mixing scenario, which you've kind of pointed out in the past. Improved offense, obviously more scoring opportunity, and he kind of showed a little bit of pass catching upside last year.
He's
So
also only
yeah,
like a year older than ETN.
yeah, which is pretty funny. But overall, I mean, he's also got 3 2023 first and 2023 seconds. Like, yeah, I mean, this is in a really good shape in terms of where your roster's at. The other thing I'll quickly add is I would gauge value on Debo Samuel. Like, if somebody's willing to, throw you, like, let's just say hypothetically, if you can,
DK Metcalf in a first or something like that.
I mean, I doubt you can get that, but I mean, even DK in a second, maybe. Like, I would see if somebody willing to
People are
offer you
pretty
that.
down on DK right now, man. There's somebody that might be willing to do something like that. But Debo's also got a kind of an uncertain future too. It wouldn't shock me if he held out before he got
I
extended
think he will.
this year, and I think that it's definitely a
I think he will.
possibility. So Debo Samuel, we have a number of different concerns with him. He's been injury, struck in the past in college, early in his NFL career, but he did stay healthy this year for the most part, and that's going to hold his value very highly. But he is still a guy that's a lot older than people think, given how old he was as a prospect, and he has a ton of value given what he did last year. And we also have lingering contract question marks as well. So if you can turn him into somebody in his tier, if you can trade Debo Samuel and CEH for AJ Brown, I'm 100% doing that.
Yeah, 100%. So overall, we can move on to the next and final team of the video, and that's going to be from Brock. Little shout out because I mean he's a longtime supporter of the channel, and I swear he's in every single live stream. So I'll give you the due respect. I got to shout out Brock, but this is a 12-team Superflex league that he's in. 0.75 tight end premium. He mentions here that there's a quarterback, 2 running back spots, 3 wide receiver spots, a tight end, and 2 flexes, along with obviously the super flex. So he mentions here, description and questions. I took over this orphan team that was middle of the pack in a league of sharps, and he decided to go all in because half of his league was selling to rebuild. I've never went all in like this before, so I was wondering if you could evaluate my trades and give advice on any future moves. Thanks, guys. So, I mean, if we're looking at the team,
I'm one of the better. I'm the all in guy, and of the two of us, I'm the guy that goes all in more than Danny. So I guess this is my jurisdiction here. So looking at his team, you guys can see Mahomes and Allen. I mean, you can't get a better quarterback core than that going all in. You
yeah,
have Eckler and Gibson as your top 2 running backs. You also have Carter, Mostert, etc. Diggs, Allen, Judy, Gallup will do just fine at wide receiver, but you probably could use a little bit more depth there. And then Mark Andrews at tight end. You can also flex Dallas Goedert given the, I guess, 0.25 advantage of the tight end premium on your regular half PPR league for tight ends. He doesn't have his first round pick in 2022. I believe doesn't have a second round pick as well. It doesn't look like he has really any picks in the next couple of years. So his trades that he talked about here, he received Austin Eckler, Stephon Diggs, and Antonio Gibson in exchange for 2 first round picks. One in 2023, one in 2024. Jalen Waddle, Kenneth Gainwell, Khalil Herbert, a 2022 third. So the meat of this deal is the first 3 assets in both. So what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think this is more than fine. As we kind of mentioned, Gainwell, Herbert, let's just say hypothetically between them is what, like a late 2 or late 3 value. Let's just say for contextual sake. So we'll just say you got 2/3 added onto this, which I mean, realistically here as a contender, whatever. Let's fugazi to you.
Mm-hmm.
Eckler, Diggs, and Gibson for Waddle and 2 first. Let's just say right now, although I have Waddle slightly ranked higher from a contending standpoint, Diggs is about Waddle in this deal.
Yeah.
Then you got Eckler and Gibson for a 2023 and 2024 first that you're expected to be mid to late as a contender. Yeah, I'm
And
fine
then you
with
can
making
throw
this.
on all the other pieces of this deal as
Yeah,
well. I think this is a good trade for you. I don't
I
think you
agree.
took him to the woodshed or anything, but I think this is probably a fair trade for both sides.
I agree with that. So, I mean, speaking of which, like, yeah, early 2022 second and a 2023 second, like, it's probably about Keenan Allen, but for a contender, I mean, you're getting a top 12 wide receiver season for, what, like, who's even an early second this year? like hypothetically? Who,
Christian
like
Watson, George
George
Pickens.
Pickens? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean Pickens in a second for Keenan. Yeah, like give me Keenan Allen as your contender. I mean, you're talking about 150, 160 plus targets and one of the most high powered offense in the league. It's really a no brainer for me.
Yeah,
Which is
Keenan
weird.
Allen is like the poster child for like a contending wide receiver. I think if you
Yeah,
guys are contending and you need wide receiver help or depth or just high end talent at that position, like Keenan Allen is the perfect wide receiver to trade for. And Diggs is also a very good wide receiver to trade for if you're contending as well. So, trade number 3, he received Josh Allen in exchange for Lamar Jackson, the 104, and a 2024 second. So, is the difference between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson to you enough that you get a top 5 pick for him?
this one's tough. As again, if I was as odd as this sounds, because you're giving up draft capital.
You also secure the stack too of Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, like okay, as weird as this sounds, if I'm a rebuilder, I'm more willing to part with this for Josh Allen. If I'm a contender, I know that Lamar Jackson is probably, I mean, outside of Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson are realistically the only redraft quarterbacks, in my opinion, that could probably usurp Josh Allen this year in terms of redraft. Year
Right.
one, 2022 production. So if we're talking about a strict 2022 production standpoint, it's a little too much for me because I mean that 104, I mean you could flip another contending piece or add another piece here, and obviously I mean the 2024 second is fine, but although it's fair value because of your status as a contender, I would have preferred the Lamar side, but I understand why you did it. You know, it's so enticing getting the 101 overall in fantasy.
Yeah, and having the 102 already on your roster with
Yeah.
Mahomes too. And you also, the thing I don't like about the trade is that at 104, you kind of do need another wide receiver, a young wide
Yeah.
receiver to add to your team, and that would have really, really helped to add
Agreed.
Garrett Wilson or Traylon Burks or Drake London to this team. But at the same time, I mean, Josh Allen he's a stud. He's going to make it seem worth it to you for sure in season.
I would have. I know that this sounds pretty crazy because people are going to be like, "What do you mean? Like you'd rather give up Mahomes?" I would have rather like if it was a deal where I could have gone Lamar Jackson 104 in a second or Mahomes in a second or a third for Allen, I would have rather given up Mahomes in that instance. As crazy as that
And
sounds.
having Allen and Lamar instead.
Yeah, yeah, and having that 104, yeah.
Yeah, if this is the cost, if the cost of this was Lamar the 111 and a 2024 second, I think this is
Yeah,
probably a more fair trade. But the 104 is a pretty decent asset, so
yeah.
I think that might have been just a bit too much to give up. Like the 104 from a startup value perspective is probably like a 4th or 5th round pick.
Yeah, so
So
so I mean,
yeah,
realistically, you're giving up our 104. Like, I mean, Lamar to me
mine
is the
is
startup
Traylon
104.
Burks.
No. I meant not even the rookie 104. I'm talking about Lamar Jackson is my 104 in startups right now.
Right, right.
Josh Allen's my 101. So basically, I mean, if we're contextualizing this from a startup's perspective, the 104 startup pick, 4 or 5 type of startup pick in a second for the 101. It's a little steep for me, but again, I mean, you're contending. Obviously, I understand it's too much. You have Diggs on the roster already. You can get, the best overall player in fantasy. So I don't fault you too hard. I just probably would have preferred Lamar's side, given the status of your team needing that extra wide receiver to complement it.
Yep, for sure. So, bit of a longer video today. Again,
Yeah.
as we talked about, we would have loved to get to all of the questions that we had from you guys. We still have about 6 or 7 submissions for next week. We will be doing a doubleheader next week. So, Angsty Reaper, Jimmy Two Feet, Stonequist, some of you guys that reached out to us, we will get you on for next week's video. If you guys want to submit more, by all means, our Patreon is the first priority. So if you want to make sure that your question gets on, patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange, you'll also get access to our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto with our 1 quarterback, super flex rookie rankings, our quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, Dynasty rankings overall, our bucketed rankings, top 100s for your startups. So that'll get you really, really prepared for your rookie drafts and for your Dynasty startups if you have any coming up. You can also get access to the Dynasty Rankings Manifesto specifically by supporting our sponsor over on UnderdogFantasy.com using promo code FSE at sign up and first deposit. You'll get 100% match back on whatever you put in as a thank you from them. And as a thank you from us, you'll get our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto for free for doing that. And they have tons of contests running right now. The NBA playoffs are underway, so you got pick'ems going for that. You got Superflex big boards for NFL stuff. You got rookies and sophomores will be closing right around the time of the NFL draft if you guys want to check those out. So tons of fun stuff going on over at Underdog. So check them out. And like I said, you'll get our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto for free. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. Peace out, guys. We'll talk to you soon.